Tonight, we journey into the heart of the Pacific Northwest, where towering mountains and dense forests hide ancient secrets. These are lands where the veil between our world and the supernatural is perilously thin, where giants walk among the trees and wild men watch from the shadows. Here, in the whispers of the wind and the rustle of the leaves, you might catch the fleeting presence of the seatco, the swift and silent guardian of these sacred grounds, or feel the ground tremble beneath the mighty steps of the Saskats, the giant whose strength rivals the mountains themselves. But the forest holds more than just giants and wild men. Shapeshifters blend seamlessly into their surroundings, becoming one with the forest, while tricksters like the matlows play their mischievous games under the cover of darkness. And lurking on the fringes, the seatco, wild and untamed, remind us that not all who dwell in the forest are human. And as night falls, the most chilling presence of all, the tatak, the owl-woman monster, stirs in the darkness, her eerie call a harbinger of doom for those who dare to wander too far. Stay with us as we explore the legends that haunt these ancient lands, where every shadow tells a story and every footstep could lead to an encounter with the unknown. This is Remote Cabin Radio, where history and mystery meet in the heart of the wild. The lands of the Salish-speaking tribes, including the Flathead, Spokane, Coeur d'Alene, Kalispel, Belkula, and Nootkas, are steeped in ancient lore, where the boundary between the natural and the supernatural is thin. These tribes, with their rich oral traditions, have long told stories of the beings that dwell in the shadowy forests and remote mountains, beings that are both feared and revered. Among these beings is the Saskats, a giant whose mere presence is said to shake the earth. Towering like the ancient trees, the Saskats walks with the strength of the mountains in its stride, its voice a deep rumble that echoes through the valleys. The ground trembles beneath its feet, and the sky darkens as if bowing to its power. This being is a reminder of the raw, untamed force of nature, a guardian of the wild places where only the brave dare to tread. The tribes speak of the seatco, a being that resembles a human, but is much larger, quick, and stealthy. The seatco is a wheeled man of the woods, covered in hair, with eyes that gleam with the cunning of a predator. It is said to move like the wind, unseen and unheard until it is too late. Those who encounter the seatco describe a chilling presence, as if the very air around them has turned to ice. This creature is both a protector and a punisher, guarding the sacred lands from those who would defile them. The bogs are another mysterious group of beings, described as zoomorphic, taking on various animal forms. These beings are shapeshifters, capable of blending into their surroundings and becoming one with the forest. They are the tree men, spirits of the woods who speak in whispers carried by the wind. The bogs are elusive, appearing only to those who have earned the forest's trust. They are the keepers of secrets, knowing the language of every creature, the song of every tree, and the heartbeat of the earth itself. Then there is the matlos, a hobgoblin that delights in causing mischief, its presence often felt in the sudden disappearance of tools or the strange noises heard deep in the night. The matlos is a trickster, a being that dances between the shadows, leaving a trail of confusion in its wake. Yet, its pranks are not born of malice, but serve as lessons, reminding the tribes to respect the spirits of the land and to tread lightly on the earth. The seatco are known as wild or stick Indians, beings that live on the fringes of human settlements, rarely seen but often felt. Their presence is a reminder of the wildness that lies just beyond the reach of civilization. The seatco are the echoes of the ancestors, the wild men who have refused to be tamed, living in harmony with the land, free from the bounds of human law. Giants also roam these lands, beings of immense size and strength whose footsteps leave craters in the earth. They are the ancient ones, the first inhabitants of the world, who remember the time before humans walked the land. These giants are both creators and destroyers, shaping the landscape with their hands, carving rivers and raising mountains. They are the embodiment of the earth's power, feared for their might, but also revered as the architects of the world. Perhaps the most feared of all is the tatak, the owl-woman monster. This creature is said to take the form of a giant owl, and its call is an omen of doom. The tribes believe that the tatak preys on those who venture too far into the wilderness, drawing them into the depths of the forest, never to return. Cannibals, too, are whispered of in these lands. These beings are said to be cursed, having turned to the dark practice out of desperation or madness. They are the embodiment of hunger, of the consuming need that drives them to devour their own kind. The tribes speak of them with a mixture of fear and pity, knowing that to become a cannibal is to lose one's soul, to become a creature of the night, forever hunted by the spirits of those they have consumed. Thes banks wheeler fera are also respecte. They are a part of the natural world, a resinger of the power and mystery shot least beshom si havan osher skazing. The stories of such legendary beings are passed down through generations, serving as both warnings and as a way to keep the tribes connected to the land and to the spirits that inhabit it. Giants and tree men. Giants were once common in Coeur d'Alene country. They had a very strong odor, like the smell of burning horn. Their faces were black. Some say they were painted black, and the giants were taller than the highest tippies. When they saw a single tippy or lodge, they would crawl up to it, rise, and look down the smoke hole. If several lodges were together, the giants were not so bold. Most of them dressed in bearskins, but some wore other kinds of skins with the hair left on. They lived in caves in the rocks. They had a great liking for fish and often stole fish from people's traps. Otherwise, they did not bother people much. They are said to have stolen women occasionally in other tribes, but there is no tradition of their having stolen women in the Coeur d'Alene country. Other supernatural beings that used to be seen in the Coeur d'Alene and Spokane countries were called the tree men. They too had a strong odor. They dressed in buffalo skins and had the power to transform themselves into trees and bushes. Once, when a number of people were dancing in the Spokane country near a small lake close to present-day Cheney, they suddenly smelled a bad odor. One of them exclaimed, "That is the tree men." The people looked around and saw 4 men standing a little apart from one another, wearing buffalo skins with the hair side out. As soon as they saw people looking at them, they disappeared. 4 bushes stood where the 4 tree men had been. Those 4 bushes could be seen until recently. Possibly the power of the people's glances killed them or prevented them from changing back into men. There are trees which have been in one spot for a very long time. They really are tree men, although they seem merely trees to people looking at them. In other spots, trees and bushes change places, or are sometimes absent and sometimes present. Often, when these beings were seen and people approached them, they disappeared, and only trees or bushes could be found. The Wild Man. People were drying fish up the Nahalem River. They heard a noise. The brush was crackling loudly, and they knew that no wind or common animal could be making that kind of noise. They hurried into their canoes and crossed to the other side of the river. They forgot their little dog. They crawled into a place and lay down to listen. Their little dog barked and barked, then suddenly stopped. Then they heard a terrific noise as Wild Man knocked down one side of the house. Then he must have gone back into the woods. They could not sleep. They were so frightened. Although they knew it was such a deep river, he would be unable to wade it. The next day, one fellow went over in a canoe to have a look. One side of that large house where they had dried fish was smashed to pieces. The dog was lying there dead, and Wild Man's huge tracks were all around. That fellow came back and told the people, "Yes, I saw his tracks." They put all of their belongings and their fish in canoes and left that place for good. They would not live there anymore for fear he might come again. After that, no one would camp on that side of the river. That really happened. There must have been a whole tribe of wild men because there were always some around. A Nahalem man was not married. He would go hunting and permit the married people to have the meat he got. One summer, he killed an elk and saved the blood. He took the elk's bladder and filled it with the blood. He made a camp near there. He placed that bladder of blood near his feet, lay down, and went to sleep. Wild Man came and helped himself to the elk meat. The man awoke. He was too warm. He was sweating. "Goodness, what is the matter?" he asked himself, looking about. It was like daylight. There was such a great fire burning there. Wild Man had placed large pieces of bark between the man and the fire, so the man would not get too hot while he slept. You see, he treated that fellow well. When he spoke to him, Wild Man called the man, "My nephew." The man awoke to see Wild Man, that extremely large man, sitting by the fire. He had the fat ribs and front of that elk on a stick, roasting them by the fire. He said, "This is how I am getting to be. I am getting to be always on the bum these days. I travel all over. I cannot find any elk. I took your elk, dear nephew. I took your elk meat." That man stretched himself. He had forgotten about that bladder of blood. He kicked it with his feet, causing it to make a noise. Wild Man looked around. He said, "It sounds as if a storm were coming." A wild man does not like to travel when it is storming. Wild Man was afraid of that noise. He kept kicking that bladder of blood. He said, "Yes, a storm is coming." Wild Man asked, "My dear nephew, would you tell me the best place to run to?" That man showed Wild Man a high bluff. "Over in that direction is a good place to run," he told him. Wild Man started out running. Soon, the man heard him fall over that bluff. The man did not go back to sleep any more that night. In the morning, he went to look. There Wild Man lay, far down at the foot of the bluff. He went around by a better route and climbed down to see the body. He took Wild Man's quiver and left Wild Man lying there. Then he became afraid, so he made ready and returned from the woods, taking as much meat as he could carry. He said, "Wild Man found me." He jumped over the bluff. He too found all kinds of bones in that quiver. They must have been lucky pieces, because elk would come down from the mountain for him, and only he could get sea lions on the rocks. That is a real happening. The seatco and seatco are The seatco, a race of tall Indians called wild or stick Indians, was said to wander through the forests. They were generally referred to as seatco, although another term, stetal from tal spear, could also be applied to them. The seatco lived by hunting and fishing. Their homes were hollowed out like the sleeping places of animals and could not be distinguished as human habitations. Because of this lack of houses or villages, they were characterized as wild. They wandered freely through the wooded country, mainly active during the hours of darkness. They were abnormally tall, always well over 6 feet. Their language was a sort of whistle, and even when people could not see them, they often heard this whistle in the distance. They had no canoes and never traveled by water. The giants played pranks on the village Indians, stealing fish from their nets at night and taking their half-cured supplies under cover of darkness. Sometimes they played pranks on individual men, such as removing their clothes and tying their legs apart, made possible by a sort of hypnotic helplessness engendered by the sound of the giant's whistle. The giants were dangerous to men if they interfered with them or caused harm to one of their members. Under these conditions, their hatred was implacable, and they always tracked the culprit down until they finally killed him with a shot from their bows. Occasionally, they stole children or adolescents and carried them off to act as wives or slaves. For this reason, children were mortally afraid of going about alone at night, and the seatco threat was used in child discipline. During summer camping trips, when mat houses with loose sides were used for shelter, children always slept in the center, surrounded by their elders, for fear that the seatco would lift the mats and spirit them away. Men avoided conflicts with the giants, and women retained the fear of them throughout their lives. One informant, a woman approaching 70, broke her habit of rising before dawn and going to an outhouse at some distance from her home because she heard the whistle of a giant one morning. This happened during the winter of 1934 to 1935. Actual killing or capture of giants was said not to have been infrequent. Here are 2 detailed accounts. In my grandfather's time, around 1850, his people captured a seatco boy and raised him. The child slept all day, then went out at night when everyone else was asleep. In the morning, they would see where he had piled up wood, caught fish, or brought in a deer. Finally, they told him he could go back to his people. He was gone many years and then came back once. He brought his seatco band with him, and the Indians could hear them whistle all around. He said he came just for a visit to see them. Then he went away for good. A man from Skycomish, who was a little older than I am, told me that he and some friends killed a seatco once. There were several of them, but the others got away. It was in the daytime, and maybe they couldn't see so well. The one they killed had a bow and arrow and was dressed in some kind of skin. Cougar, I guess. Seatco. Nusculi mythology describes a single creature, seatco, calling him the most dangerous of the Indian demonology. Seatco had the form of an Indian, but was larger, quick, and stealthy. He inhabited the dark recesses of the woods where his campfires were often seen. He slept by day, but sallied forth at dusk for a night of it. He robbed traps, broke canoes, stole food and other portable property, and waylaid the belated traveler. It is said he killed all those whose bodies were found dead. To his wicked and malicious cunning is credited all the unfortunate and malicious acts which cannot otherwise be explained. He stole children and brought them up as slaves in his dark retreats. He was a constant menace to the disobedient child and an object of fear and terror to all. The giant. Once, a giant called Saskets came to Union Bar. The people were living in a large wooden house. The giant leaned his back against the side of the house and shook it violently. Some men ran out to see what was the matter and saw a man who was exceedingly tall. The people were afraid, but he did not harm them. The cannibal. There was a man who belonged to the mouth of the Fraser River. He was of great stature and strength and often killed people. Whenever he went to attack people, his wife accompanied him. Once, he came up the Fraser River as far as Hope, and from there he returned. He attacked many houses, demolishing them and killing the inmates, both male and female. On this journey, as on all others, he returned home carrying the heads of his victims. He and his wife had heavy burdens. He never came back. The tatak, owl woman monster. Yakima Indian William Charlie told this story to L.V. McWhorter about the tatak, owl woman monster in 1918. Before the tribes lived peaceably in this country, before the last creation, there were certain people who ate Indians whenever they could get them. They preferred and hunted children as better eating. These people, the tatak, were taller and larger than the common human. They ate every bad thing known, such as frogs, lizards, snakes, and other things that Indians do not eat. They talked the Indian language and in that way might fool the Indians. There were 5 of them, all sisters, but at the last creation they came up only in California. 2 were seen there. They were women, tall, big women, who lived in a cave. One time, the Shasta Indians, were digging roots and camped. They knew that the 2 tatak were in that place. The Indians were careful, but the tatak caught one little boy, not to eat, but to raise up and live with them. The boy thought he would be killed, but he was not. The tatak had him several days. One day, when they were out of sight, the boy hurried away. He ran fast, traveled over rough, wild places, and at last reached his own people. After many years, the 2 tatak were destroyed. None knew how, but perhaps by a higher power. Their cave home became red hot and blew out. The monster women were never seen again, never more heard of, but they have always been talked about as the most dangerous beings on earth. One other, of the 5 sisters, was drowned. From her eye, all owls were created. The person or power that killed her said to her, "From now on, your eye will be the only part of you to act. At night, it will go to certain birds, the owls." A Yakima Indian named Tamawash told McWhorter another tatak story in 1919. Owl Shopautan was the man. He was a big chief who lived at Poyakusan. He went up the Natchez River to hunt deer. Many men went with him. They hunted all day, and when evening came, Owl did not return to camp. The hunters called to each other, "Owl is not here. Owl is away. Owl is lost." Tatak, the evil old woman with her basket, heard that call in the twilight. "Owl is lost." And she said to her 4 sisters, "We must go hunt Owl who is lost from his people. We will get him for ourselves." Owl knew that tatak was coming for him, so he went up to a hollow place in the Tiktea. You can see the trail that he traveled up the face of the rock to the cave, high up in the wall of Tiktea. Grass is growing along the narrow trail. You can see it when you are out from the rock where it winds up the cliff. Owl had killed a deer. He filled the tripe with the blood of the deer. He heard tatak coming, and he knew she would kill him. He knew, and he placed the blood-filled tripe in front of him. Tatak entered the mouth of the cave. She looked. It was dark, but she saw it, the strange thing lying there. She did not know. She was afraid. She called to Owl, "Take it away. I do not like it." Owl said, "No, that is something powerful. Step over it." Tatak did as told, stepped her foot over the tripe. Owl was ready. He did not get up. He sat there, and when tatak stepped, he punched the tripe with his stick. He punched it often, and it went kloop, kloop, kloop. tatak was scared. She screamed, threw up her hands, and fell from the cliff. The Wana River ran by the base of the cliff, deep and swift. Tatak fell into the water and was killed. One version of a story called A Story About Two Girls a long time ago, written by Louis Mann, is about the birth of a golden baby. In this story, 5 young giant women, Tatak from the south, stole the baby. Footnotes: the owl has the eye of this sinister monster, this devourer of children. Among the Okanogans, she is called Snena, Owl Women. From Ghost Voices, 1992, Great Eagle Publishing. Shopao Tan, a species of owl smaller than the great horned owl and noted for its wisdom. Poyakusun, definition undetermined. The name of the country immediately up the Teton River and adjacent to the confluence of that stream with the Natchez River. Tikte, this is Eagle Rock on the Natchez River. It is an imposing pile by the side of the highway, on the south side of the river. Appearances would indicate that the river at no remote time swept the base of this rock as narrated. The channel is now several rods to the north. Tiktea would indicate that the scene of Owl's feet was named for the pilot bird of the salmon. The natural habitat of this bird is the river cliffs and bluffs. In places, the perpendicular banks of the Enchewana Columbia River are oftentimes festooned with their nests. Accounts from L.V. McWhorter. Places of mythological interest. Chief among the places of mythological interest are the surf fishing camps on the ocean shore south of Mad River. These sites have several names. Dandy Bill called the northern site Tokelibowok, but he couldn't recall the name for the prehistoric remains opposite Site 36. Alex Sam provided 2 names, Sho for the northern part and Wadiswa for the southern stretch of remains. These sites were once inhabited by the Old Nation, known as the Wigidokawok. The informants didn't know much about these ancient people because their fathers hadn't told them much. They mentioned that a long time ago there were many of these beings who were as much like animals as they were like men. They might have been the deer people, the elk people, or possibly the duck people. The informants were unsure. Eventually, another group of people arrived and constantly tricked the first people. One way they annoyed them was by dropping excrement down the smoke holes into their dwellings. These droppings can still be seen today as circles of stones. The first people became angry and left. Some say they went far to the south, and perhaps their descendants became Mexicans. Site 8. These same ancient people also lived on Site 8, near a waterfall on Mill Creek. According to a manuscript by A.L. Kroeber, the Yurok believed that the trail to the end of the world began near this place. Footnotes: the Northwestern mythologies are characterized primarily by a very deeply impressed conception of a previous, now vanished race, who by first living the life and performing the actions of mankind, were the producers of all human institutions and arts, as well as of some of the phenomena of nature. Second in importance in the Northwest are myths dealing with culture heroes, more or less, of the trickster type, zoomorphic beings, box. The attitude of mingled hope and fear with which the Belacoola regard their supernatural anthropomorphic beings is typical of their thoughts and actions concerning zoomorphic creatures as well. In the supernatural world, the dividing line between human and animal beings is not clearly defined. Fabulous monsters have the mentality of supermen and can be appeased, besought, or cajoled precisely as are anthropomorphic beings. Like those in human form, supernatural animals can bestow good or evil on human beings with whom they come into contact. The box somewhat resembles a man, its hands especially, and the region around the eyes being distinctly human. It walks on its hind legs in a stooping keys posture, its long arms swinging below the knees. In height, it is rather less than the average man. The entire body, except the face, is covered with long hair, the growth being most profuse on the chest, which is large, corresponding to the great strength of the animal. The most peculiar feature of the animal is its penis, which is so long that it must be rolled up and carried in the arms when the creature is walking. It terrifies its enemies by striking tree trunks and breaking branches with its uncoiled organ. It is said that a woman was once drawing water at the edge of a stream when a box concealed on the other shore extended its penis under the water to the further bank and held intercourse with her. The contact rendered her powerless, as if turned to stone. She could neither flee nor remove the organ. Her companions tried unsuccessfully to cut the organ until one of them brought a salilberry leaf, whereupon the monster, dreading its razor-like edge, withdrew. The following stories illustrate, better than any other description, the attitude of the Belacoola toward these animals. Not many years ago, a certain Kaklis was encamped with his wife and child in the Bay of the Thousand Islands, Altuklaxos, about 2 miles above Namu, one of the haunts of the box. He heard a number of the creatures in the forest behind him and seized his gun, at the same time calling out to them to go away. Instead, the breaking of branches and beating upon tree trunks came nearer. Becoming alarmed, he called out once more, "Go away, or you shall feel my power." They still approached, and Kaklis fired in the direction of the sounds. There followed a wild commotion in the forest, roars, grunts, pounding, and the breaking of branches. The hunter, now thoroughly alarmed, told his wife and child to embark in the canoe while he covered their retreat with his gun. He followed them without molestation and anchored his craft not far from shore. The box could be heard plainly as they rushed to and fro on the beach, but only the vague outlines of their forms were visible in the darkness. Presently, though there was no wind, the canoe began to roll as if in a heavy sea. Kaklis decided to flee to Restoration Bay, but before he had gone far, his paddle struck bottom, although he was in mid-channel. Looking up, he saw that the mountains were higher than usual. The box had, by their supernatural power, raised the whole area so that the water had been almost entirely drained away. They are the only supernatural beings with this power. Kaklis jumped overboard into the water, which reached only to his knees, and towed his canoe to Restoration Bay, the box following him along the shore. This is not the only occasion on which box have appeared near Restoration Bay. Within the lifetime of the father of an informant, a chief set out with some friends from Quatna, bound for Namu. They traveled overland to Restoration Bay, thence by canoe, making the journey without incident. When returning, they decided to gather clams on the rocky point of the bay. As the craft shot around the tip of the promontory, they saw a box gathering shellfish. The paddlers backed their canoe behind some rocks, whence they could watch without being seen. The creature acted as if frightened. It kept looking backwards, then hurriedly scraped up some clams with its forepaws, dashed off with these into the forest, and came back for more. The chief decided to attack the animal. A frontal approach was impossible owing to the lack of cover, so he landed and crept stealthily through the forest, armed with his Hudson's Bay Company's musket. Presently, he stumbled upon a heap of clams which the animal had collected. He waited until it returned with another load, then raised his musket and fired. Instead of killing the box, its supernatural power was so great that the hunter's musket burst in his hands, though he himself was not injured. The box shrieked and whistled as if in anger, and at once hordes of its mates came dashing out through the forest. The frightened chief rushed out on the beach and called to his comrades to save him. They brought the canoe close to the shore so that he could clamber aboard, and then paddled away unharmed. The Bellacoola believe that the box, unlike most supernatural animals, have not abandoned the country since the coming of the white man. One man was most insistent that they still lived on King Island and promised to point one out if a visit were made to that spot. This man refuses to camp at the place where he affirmed box are common. Another informant stated that though he had never seen one of the monsters, a horde of them surrounded his camp near Canoe Crossing for a week. Every night he heard them roaring and beating on trees and branches. A curious blending of old and new beliefs was recorded in connection with this statement. This man remarked that once he was gathering firewood when he heard the creatures closing in on him. His head swam with terror until he remembered he was a Christian. He called on Jesus to help him, grasped his axe, and dashed towards the place from which the loudest sounds were coming. He heard the animals moving off all around him, but failed to see any of them. Box have been heard as recently as 1924, according to popular belief. In January of that year, a number of young Bellacoola were returning home in a motorboat from Ocean Falls. They camped for the night on Burke Channel and were alarmed to hear a crashing of bushes and a beating on tree trunks. Thoroughly frightened, they directed the beams of several electric torches in the direction of the sounds without avail, and at last started the engine of their motorboat, the noise of which frightened the animals away. Matlow's Shom. Matlows is a famous hobgoblin of the Nootkas. He is a very Caliban of spirits. His head is like the head of something that might have been man, but is not. His uncouth bulk is horrid, with black bristles, and his monstrous teeth and nails are like the claws of a bear. Whoever hears his terrible voice falls like one smitten, and his curved claws rend a prey into morsels with a single stroke. As we close tonight's journey into the heart of the Pacific Northwest, we've glimpsed the rich tapestry of legends that weave through its ancient forests and towering mountains. From the mighty Saskats, whose footsteps shake the earth, to the elusive seatco that haunts the shadows, these tales remind us of the profound connection between the land and its supernatural guardians. We've ventured through the realms of the shape-shifting bogs, the mischievous Matlos, and the wild seatco, uncovering the secrets of the forest and the echoes of a time when giants roamed freely. We've felt the chill of the tatak's ominous call and understood the deep-seated fear and respect for the cannibals of legend. These stories, etched into the lore of the Salish-speaking tribes, are not merely tales of fear, but also of reverence. They are a testament to the power and mystery of nature, and a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the unknown. Thank you for joining us on Remote Cabin Radio, where we delve into the enigmatic and the extraordinary. Until next time, may your paths be guided by wisdom and your nights be filled with the thrill of discovery. Keep listening, keep questioning, and always remember that in the heart of the wild, the stories never truly end. Good night, and stay curious. If you're intrigued by the tales and legends we've explored tonight and wish to delve deeper into the rich folklore of the Pacific Northwest, there are several invaluable resources to guide your journey. Nehalem Tillamook Tales by Elizabeth Dare Jacobs offers a comprehensive collection of traditional stories from the Nehalem Tillamook people, preserving their unique cultural narratives. Eugene, University of Oregon Books, 1959. The Puyallup Nisqually by Marion W. Smith provides insights into the myths and legends of the Puyallup and Nisqually tribes, capturing their distinct voices and traditions. AMS Press, Inc., New York, 1969. The works of Hubert Howe Bancroft, Volume 3, The Native Races, is an essential historical text detailing the myths and languages of various Native American tribes, including those from the Pacific Northwest. San Francisco, A.L. Bancroft and Company, Publishers, 1883. Legends Beyond Psychology by Henry James Franzoni and Kyle Mizukami explores the intersection of folklore and psychological interpretations, offering a unique perspective on the legends we've discussed. UC Publications in American Archaeology and Ethnology, Volume 14, Number 1, presents scholarly articles on American archaeology and ethnology, including studies related to Native American folklore. Folk Tales of the Salishan and Sahaptin Tribes, edited by Franz Boas, is a cornerstone in the study of Salishan and Sahaptin folklore, capturing a wide range of traditional stories. Krauss Reprint Company, New York, 1969, originally published by the American Folklore Society, 1917. Indian Legends from the Northern Rockies by Ella E. Clark provides a compilation of legends from the Northern Rockies region, offering further insight into the rich tapestry of Native American storytelling. University of Oklahoma Press, 1977. These references will not only deepen your understanding of the legends we've discussed, but also provide a broader context for the rich tapestry of Native American folklore and its cultural significance. Happy reading and exploring.